And the message of the book is the exact opposite. That we live in a world which was created by the choices people made, by the stories people told centuries ago, thousands of years ago. But if there is something we don't like about the world, we can make different choices. We can tell different stories.
Oi, gente! Como eu sempre digo a partir de agora, menos emoção e mais razão. Perceberam que eu mudei de cenário, né? Mas antes de eu contar por quê, se inscreve no canal, deixa seu like e compartilha esse vídeo com seus amigos. Hoje a gente vai fazer uma coisa muito diferente e muito legal nesse canal, eu tô muito animada. Nós vamos apresentar a minha entrevista com o professor, historiador e autor best-seller já traduzido em 65 línguas, Yuval Harari. Pois é, e a gente conversou sobre o novo livro dele, Implacáveis, Como Nós Conquistamos o Mundo. Agora, um livro destinado para o público infanto-juvenil, mas a conversa é para todo mundo, tá? Eu fiz umas perguntas muito legais, tava super nervosa, gastei meu inglês, o vídeo vai ser com legenda, chiquérrimo, gente, vocês vão amar, assistam. Hello, Professor Harari. It is a pleasure to be here with you. I have been a big fan of your work, so it is indeed an honor to be here. I'm a little bit nervous, but I think I will be okay.
Okay, that's great. I'm also a little bit nervous. I've done it like 1,000 times, but every time it's a bit tense.
Okay, so I feel more comfortable. Professor Harari, what was the difference between writing for adults and writing for young people? And why did you feel the need to communicate with a younger audience?
Well, the need is obvious because, everybody needs to take part in the conversation about the future of humanity. And for that, we need to know where we came from. It's important to include kids in the conversation as well. And writing for young people, in one way, it's easier than writing for adults, because young people, they don't already believe all the fictions and all the mythologies that adults are attached to. So it's easier to explain to kids what money is, or what gods are, or what nations are, because they haven't heard the mythology around these things so many times before. And then from a different perspective, it's a bit more difficult, because when you write for adults and you're not sure about something, you can just, write these very long, complicated sentences with lots of big words, and people don't really understand you, but they think it's their fault, that they're not smart enough or whatever. With kids, this trick doesn't work. You have to speak in a very clear and simple way. So you have to know what you're talking about. So writing for kids actually forced me to think harder about what I'm saying than when I wrote for adults.
Brilliant. And Sapiens' superpower is imagination and the ability to create narratives. You are a bestseller storyteller who has been translated in 65 languages, and now you are venturing into books for children. Do you think reading is a way for children to develop the superpower, and what stories will the children of now tell about our moment in history?
Ooh, well, that's in their hands. I don't know what stories they will tell in 30 or 40 years. Part of the message of the book is that humans create the world in which we live, and therefore humans can change it. People sometimes feel that the way the world is, it just has to be like this. There is nothing we can do about it. It's out of our hands. And the message of the book is the exact opposite. That we live in a world which was created by the choices people made, by the stories people told centuries ago, thousands of years ago. But if there is something we don't like about the world, we can make different choices. We can tell different stories. And stories are not stories are not good or bad inherently. They are just a tool. It's like a knife. You can use a knife to murder somebody, You can use a knife to save their life in surgery. You can use a knife to cut salad for dinner. It's the same with stories. You can use a story to kill people, millions of people. The biggest wars and genocides in history, they were made possible by stories people invented. But you can also use stories to save people's lives, to unite people for good causes. So we have to be very, very careful about what kind of stories we create, and especially what kind of stories we teach the younger generations, because these stories will shape the world of the future.
And related to that, one of the final messages of the book is that knowledge is responsibility. Why did you feel that this was one of the lessons you wanted to pass on to young people?
Because we need people to take more responsibility for the world, for their lives. You know, we have this trend today of people very often looking at themselves as victims. And you have even the strongest people in the world, the most powerful countries in the world, having this story, I'm a victim. You have even countries, you know, like in the war in Ukraine, Russia says, I'm a victim. You have China, India saying, we are victims of the West. You have the West, even the Americans. Now you have the white American men telling a story that we are victims. And why are everybody attracted to this story of victimhood? Because it relieves you of responsibility. If you're a victim, it means you're not responsible for the problems of the world. You didn't create them. You are not responsible for solving them. You don't have the power to do that. You can focus on just getting more power for yourself. And if everybody thinks this way, that we are all victims of these very powerful forces, and we are not responsible for what's happening, and we can't do anything, we just need more power for ourselves, then nobody is actually solving the problems we're facing. It just gets worse. So it's very important to convey a message, not of victimhood, but a message of empowerment and responsibility, that human beings, all human beings, have some measure of power. Not the same. Of course, you have billionaires, you have poor people, you have people from rich countries, from poor countries. There are differences. But every human being has some agency, has some measure of power, and therefore also has some responsibility for using my little amount of power in a way which improves the situation instead of making it worse.
So the stories we tell ourselves also matter.
Absolutely. You know, and I look, for instance, at events in my country, in Israel. I look at the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. What is it really about? It's actually about the stories that people tell themselves. It's not about territory and food. Humans are not like chimpanzees or wolves that fight over territory and food. We think we fight over that. It's not true. There is enough land between the Mediterranean and the Jordan River and enough food to build houses and to feed everybody. But people have incompatible stories in their minds. Like one group says, this entire land is mine because my God gave it to me. And the other group says, no, this entire land is mine because my God gave it to me. And they can't agree on the story. And of course, also both of them think about themselves as victims, rather than as in any way responsible for the situation. So it's because so many of the conflicts in the world are really about the stories in our minds, we should be, again, very, very careful what stories we tell, not just others, but above all else, what stories we tell ourselves.
And it seems that adaptability is one of Sapiens' main characteristics. What should we be teaching our children, or what should we be learning about adapting in a changing world, in a never-changing world?
I think we are now, the world is changing at a faster pace than in any previous time in history. It's the first time in history, for instance, we have no idea how the job market would look like in 20 years. With artificial intelligence and automation and computers and robots, nobody knows how the job market would look like, except that it will be very different from today. So we don't know what kind of specific skills to teach kids today. You know, in previous centuries, most people were peasants. Nobody could predict the future, but you knew that if you teach your children how to plant corn and how to make flour and how to bake bread, this is important. Today, we don't know what will be the skills required in 2040 or 2050. So the most important skill is the ability to keep changing, to keep learning, to keep reinventing yourself again and again, which, you know, it's so stressful psychologically to keep changing and reinventing yourself throughout your life. And we need to give kids the kind of psychological intelligence and the mental flexibility to be able to do that. So yes, we are very adaptable animals, but this is going to be challenged in the 21st century like never before. You know, you think about the most basic human skills, even things we learn as toddlers, as babies, like we learn how to see, we learn how to walk. Now, in 20 years, maybe we spend several hours every day in virtual reality. Maybe our jobs are in virtual reality. Maybe your job is to design shirts, virtual shirts for virtual reality. Now, in virtual reality, there is a different physics. You don't walk the same way. You don't see the same way. So if you want a job as a designer of virtual shirts, you need to relearn how to see. And if you want to move around the virtual reality, you need to relearn how to walk. Imagine yourself at age, 50, 60, 70. You want to stay relevant. Can you relearn how to walk when you're 60?
One sentence that I remember from the beginning of the book was, "It is always better to say, I don't know." I find that this is a valuable lesson for all, not just for children and teenagers, but also for adults. Do you feel that more adults should just admit, I don't know about the subject, let's call a specialist, or even let's just admit our ignorance and seek to learn?
Yeah, I think this is the essence of science. Science doesn't claim to have complete knowledge of the world, of climate, of epidemics, of physics. No. The essence of science is that we know some things, and there are many things we don't know. And, if you think you know everything, there is no longer any need to do research. We do research because we don't know. And this is how, over time, our knowledge increases. We gain better understanding of things like, again, epidemics. In the Middle Ages, you had the Black Death killing about a third of the population of Asia and Europe and North Africa. And people didn't know anything about the real cause of the epidemic. They didn't know anything about germs, about how they spread, but they thought they knew. They thought the epidemic was caused either by black magic, so they persecuted witches and so forth, or they thought it was caused by the anger of God. So they came together in synagogues and mosques and churches to pray to God. And it didn't work. It didn't stop the epidemic. In the modern era, scientists began to say, we don't know what is causing epidemics. And they investigated it. And out of this came a much better understanding of what bacteria and viruses are, how they spread, how they can be stopped. And even today, we don't know everything. We saw this during the pandemic. There are many things we still don't understand about how viruses evolve, or how to stop viruses effectively with vaccines. And it's very important, on the one hand, to be clear about what we do know, and on the other hand, to draw a line and say, beyond that line, we don't understand, let's keep researching.
Thank you very much, Professor Harari. It was a pleasure to talk to you. I'm one of your many fans here in Brazil, and I'm sure that everybody who follows me on Instagram, on YouTube, or even on TV will be tremendously happy to hear directly from you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure for me too.
Bom, espero que vocês tenham gostado da entrevista tanto quanto eu gostei. Se vocês tiverem alguma dúvida, quiserem deixar aqui embaixo nos comentários. Quem sabe eu não tenho a possibilidade de conversar com o professor Harari de novo para solucionar as dúvidas de vocês. Deixem o like, se inscrevam no canal e compartilhem o vídeo com seus amigos. Tchau, tchau!